All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and make some announcements and we'll get started. So welcome everyone. My name is Amy Van Dyne. Along with being a member of the Social Action Committee here at UUCMC, I represent my congregation in the New Jersey Social Justice Remembrance Coalition. This coalition was formed to work with Bryan Stevenson's Equal Justice Initiative to place a historical marker in Eatontown at the site of the only registered lynching in New Jersey. As you saw in the film, there is a need for each community to reconcile with their role in the racial terror that took place in the not too distant past. There is a virtual program on Thursday, May 6th, to introduce the coalition and the work we are doing. Additionally, next month on May 23rd, our Voices program will be dedicated to learning more about the lynching that took place in Eatontown and the history of the remembrance stone that is currently in place at the site. I will put links in the chat for both of these programs, and I hope you can join us. And now I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Carroll.
Oh, well, good evening and welcome. Thank you, everybody, for responding in the chat. I really hope that tonight we will have a really lively discussion and engagement. So I'm going to do an opening, a land acknowledgement, and then we have a guest, Jennifer, who has been down to Montgomery at the site of the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, and she's going to share her experience, because if you saw the film or if you've read about it, you know that Bryan Stevenson, he's the architect of that incredible museum, which is directed to shedding light on the history of racialized terror in the United States. I'm a family who was a victim of racialized terror. Some of you know or may not know that the Klan, when my grandparents moved on the east side of the tracks here at the house where I'm living now, the Klan burned crosses on this property as a warning to my grandfather not to continue. And I'll say that the gift of the documentary for me last night was the gift of the language around racialized terror and a sense of brokenness and places in myself that are broken, and how one inherits this. So we'll talk more about that as we get into our conversation. But first, as Bryan Stevenson so poignantly and eloquently shares in this transformational documentary, when he talks about owning, honoring, remembering, and recognizing what happened to the indigenous people of this country, where we're all living. So I will share the land acknowledgement tonight, and I will ask, is it all right for me to begin out of respect to the elders? So put a thumbs up if you're ready to begin. All right, thank you very much. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. And that's all of us. That's all of our ancestors that contributed and led to this moment. And I am grateful. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life. And we have both audiences here tonight. And some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. And perhaps we have people in this community who have indigenous blood in their veins. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We began this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We are standing on the ancestral lands of Native people, Most of us here in New Jersey, it would be the land of the Lanai Lenape. We pay respects to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Thank you, Ashe. So without further ado, let us bring on Jennifer Lewinski. Jennifer is going to talk about her experience with having gone to the memorial, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. And that's where we're going to open our conversation. And I have a curated conversation tonight because I have a lot of questions to ask you all to consider, and hopefully you'll respond verbally. You can certainly, just let me know by, raising your hand and I'll recognize you. You can also place questions and responses in the chat. So Jennifer, without further ado, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. So when Amy asked me to talk about this, I started thinking about what even there is to say, because there's so many emotions wrapped up all in one thing. So I'm still not quite sure where to start. So I started by watching the documentary again. I had seen it before, but I watched it again. And the weekend that me and Amy went to Alabama was the opening of the EJI exhibit. So it was super exciting at first. Every superhero of mine that I can think of, almost every book that I have bought in the last 15 years, the authors were there. All the music that I listened to, the people that sing it were there. People that we learn about in history class were there. They were there. And I was elated and energized and just having all the feelings. And listening to them speak it gave me a really renewed spirit to do social justice work, which is hard work and it's exhausting. So it's really easy to burn out and want to give up. And so hearing all of these heroes of mine talking about what to do next gave me a tremendous amount of energy and excitement, and I was buzzing. I was all over the place and I couldn't contain myself. And then I think it was the third day we went to the museum and the memorial, and it was a complete shift. No, it was super crowded. There was hundreds and hundreds of people, and it was completely silent. Occasionally you could hear someone sobbing or sniffling, but there was barely any talking. And there was just all of this time to think about the things. And even though there was all those same super famous, exciting people walking around, that just was not the energy. It was sobering initially, and I felt kind of outside myself. And while I was walking through, as you walk through, you kind of walk down and the memorials get higher and higher. And once they were above my head and I could see the water wall and the jars of earth from the lynching sites, I kind of froze in place. And I got this, I don't know, terror, I guess, because there was so many things. I work in social justice, so I think about what is wrong all the time, and I look for solutions all the time. Every time I see a thing, I think, is this thing okay? And if it's not okay, is there a way that we can make it okay? And there was no way for me to make to make any of that okay. There's like what I was feeling, what I was thinking. There was really no way for me to reconcile it in the moment. And I was looking at the names, and my family is very separated. I don't know my father's family very well. I knew them when I was little. But what I know of um, my family history, at least on my father's side, is that they um, were in Alabama. They were slaves in Alabama, um, and left in the Great Migration. What I started to realize in that moment, and really may not have reconciled yet still, is that while I was looking for the name, I don't know what my father's actual last name is. So part of the family holds one name and part of the family holds another name. And even if it was the name that was passed down through those generations, any of those people could have been my people, because we were separated and we went to different places and we took on the name of the owners of whatever plantation we were on. So any of those people could have been my ancestors. And I found myself looking for any names that I knew, names of friends, names of cousins, uncles, just anyone, any names that I recognized. And there were hundreds of them. I recognized hundreds and hundreds of names that could have been, but we don't know who we're related to. And in attempting to reconcile that, I think part of that is just this sort of atmosphere of chosen family that happens in Black communities, right? That's my play auntie, that's my cousin. Um, and I have dozens of cousins. But in reality, I only know 4 of my cousins, and that is on the European side of my family. My grandmother, my European grandmother, my mother's mother, I can trace her family back, I think 200 or 300 years pretty easily, to know where everyone came from. My grandfather's family, my grandfather was in the Holocaust. He was on the Kindertransport. So left Germany during World War II when he was very young and lost his parents. But we can still go back, I think, like 700 or 800 years to Poland, and we know our entire family history. And of my father's family, all I really know is slaves, sharecroppers, separation, trauma, and migration. And I don't know them personally. I started looking for them not long after this because I know that they were relatively local. My aunts, 2 of them lived in Neptune. And I asked my mother, and she told me that one of them lived across the street from us for like 15 years. And I never saw her, never knew her, never knew she was there. So, in thinking about the ways that that chattel slavery affects today, it's not just systemic, it's super personal, and it's profoundly painful in ways that are honestly indescribable. The ways that relationships are formed, the ways that children are raised, the way that we fear, for our lives and our families all of the time. The reaction of being pulled over by the police is like slave catchers are behind you, and the immediate feeling is to run, even if you haven't done anything wrong, even if there's nothing that even if you know that there's nothing legally that should be able to happen to you, you know that it can anyway. And I spend my life, for the most part, fighting against all of these systems. And at the end of the day, most of the work that needs to be done is super interpersonal, and figuring out how to break some of those generational curses and make sure that my kids learn how to reconcile this huge amount of trauma that comes from not knowing where you come from outside of this horrible, vicious violence. And to reconcile that trauma in a way that doesn't make you angry, that doesn't make you want to fight all of the time. So me and my children have all found nonviolent ways to fight. And I'm not going to say but and there are also times where I really just want to light something on fire, and I don't know what to do with that feeling inside of me. I don't know that I'll ever figure out how to fix that, just because there are so many things, and for some reason there are still so many people that don't believe that Black people have a right to be angry, to be hurt, to feel pain. And they victimize themselves in these ways. And that's the thing that makes me want to light something on fire. Is today there was, I have to look at it because I don't remember the website. Today, someone came and put stickers all up and down Cookman Avenue and the boardwalk that say BLM burn, loot, murder. And it has a website for njeha.com. And of course, we went to the website out of curiosity, because obviously, and it is the New Jersey European Heritage Association. And it's a call to all patriots to take action, because the end of the white race will be here in 30 years. Because when you mix white with any other race, it's no longer white. We didn't make those rules, though. Just to say, that wasn't us that came up with that. Just to be clear. And that was the first thing that I thought, like why'd you make the rule if it bugs you out so much? Like, whatever. And at the same time, when something racist happens, or someone says something wildly racist and I'm offended, the response is, well, your last name is Lewinski and you grew up with white people. But by your rules, I'm not white. By my understanding, I'm not white. And by my life experience, I'm not white. So none of that matters. And even if it did, everyone should be offended. Everyone should be offended when someone like my neighbor downstairs at a dinner party says the Blacks have all the rights now, and that Michelle Obama looks like a monkey in a dress. Even though he knew that I heard him, but he didn't think that I was going to be offended because I grew up with white people. It's really easy inside my little social justice bubble to forget that those kind of people exist and are walking among us and are dangerous. That is violence. Like, when we talk about violence, we think of burning and killing and stabbing and fighting, but that's That's not the only violence that happens. The violence that happens every day is not being able to trace your ancestry, is not knowing where your dad comes from, not being sure what his name is, knowing that the only thing that you understand about your family was that horrible things happened and that generational trauma passed itself down and turned into addiction and abuse. And there's nothing that I can do about that now except try to make sure that it doesn't affect my children in the same way that it affected me, and make sure that it doesn't affect me in the same way that it affected him. In some ways it has, but I think we're doing a pretty good job thus far. But the personal work is the really hard work. And that's the feeling of walking through that memorial, being a person who is a descendant of slaves, knowing that that violence is your history and that's all you know of your history because the rest isn't written. You can't find it. You can't, like, there's really no way to trace it, even if you wanted to, because of the way that families were separated, because of the way that babies disappeared, because of the way that people were killed. There's just no way to know exactly where you came from. So the only thing we know about where we come from is where we are right now. And it is still a very violent place to live, even today. Today, white supremacists walked in front of my house and put up stickers to advertise for their website. So I don't know, to say that it's painful, I guess, doesn't quite do it justice. And like I said, I really have not reconciled. I don't have a word. I don't have words for what the feeling is. And I think that if I look too hard for them, I will actually burst into tears, and I'm trying not to do that right now. Bryan Stevenson does some amazing work that does energize me on a regular basis. And I have a nonprofit that is working to educate people on transformative justice. And that mission is super important to me because of the legacy of the way that the American justice system works and victimizes my family. And so I would implore all of you to do some research on transformative justice, and think about abolition in a real way. I know that it's a scary topic to talk about abolition. It terrifies people. But if you look at it from a restorative justice and a transformative justice lens, it can change that view for you, because we're not just talking about taking away police and ending all the laws and letting violence happen. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about dealing with all of those things interpersonally, like, and starting just as simple as, if your neighbor's music is too loud, go and knock on the door and get to know the people that you live in the neighborhood with, instead of calling the police, because you could call the police on someone who is undocumented and inadvertently destroy an entire family. You could call the police on someone who's being abused and get them murdered because their partner thinks that they called the police, right? So there's all of these really good reasons to just not utilize the police, because it is dangerous for BIPOC, right? It's just not safe for us. It's not safe for us to use the police. So the less you use them, the less necessary they will be, and that funding can go to places that actually will help us and do us some good, and help us form some real justice, and let us get to know each other and police each other and help us learn how to do the right thing and deal with our traumas and understand where each other is coming from. A really good book about transformative justice is called Beyond Survival. It is my favorite book. Notice it's very close by. Strategies and Stories from the Transformative Justice Movement. Jairus Dixon and Leah Lakshmi. I hope I don't tear up her name. And the last person, I can't even say her name. I know I'll tear it up. I'm really bad with names. But Beyond Survival is an amazing book. And it is a way for all of us to interpersonally start to look for real avenues to justice that don't put people in danger. And I do this work because that's the only solution I found thus far to deal with the constant barrage of violence. And also I have a nonprofit called AP Transformative Justice Project. Someone dropped our and Beyond Survival, look at you, dropped our website in the chat. You can go and read about the work that we're doing and the work that we're trying to do, and donate, which would be really nice because we have a guy that needs a place to live and we can't get it for him because we have no money. And that's all I have. Thank you so much for having me. I would love if anyone had any questions to answer them.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for your transparency. And I do have a question. So you used the term abolition, and there might be people who don't understand the context of that word abolition from the point of view of transformative justice. So perhaps you would share a definition with us.
Sure. So when we talk about abolition, we're talking about ending unjust systems, right? We're not talking about ending all systems. We're not talking about just making them go away. We're talking about ending unjust systems. So systems that oppress people, from capitalism to the prison industrial complex to the system of policing. We're talking about ending those systems. We're talking about building just systems. And a lot of people have a lot of different ways. The way that we look at it is cooperative economics and cooperative policing. So we're trying to build a policing initiative right now where you could call us to de-escalate instead of calling the police, right? If you don't feel safe calling the police, you call us and we go and ask your neighbor to turn the music down, or inquire if you think that your neighbor's being abused and you hear noise, right? Because there's no reason that we as community cannot behave as community and protect each other and care for each other. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about not utilizing systems that oppress people and finding ways to build systems that don't oppress people. So we need to replace it with something, and we're building the replacements before abolition, right? Transformative justice is how we're building a justice system outside of an oppressive justice system. So yes, abolition, we don't want police. Police are the great grandchildren of slave catchers. So they are doing their job when they shoot unarmed Black people. But there is a better way, right? There's other countries that do way better at this than we do. And we can look at all of those other models and change what we have so that we are all safe and we live in this, in community instead of this oppressive system. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much for sharing that, because a lot of people, they hear the term abolition and they think about what they learned in 8th grade history. So it's like they're kind of stuck in time where, abolition is something that applies to today and is called for in today's time if we're going to change and if we're going to go forward. So, all right, you all, now it is, oh, and someone's saying, can you please help me understand the term transformative justice? So thank you for the question.
Sure. So there's lots of definitions for transformative justice. There's a lot of people doing this work. One of them is Miriam Keba. She's one of my favorite people in the world that I've never met. Transformative justice really is, instead of just giving you a definition, because they tend to be very heady and academic and don't mean anything outside of academic context, if that makes any sense. So like if you're not reading a book, the definition doesn't mean anything. So I will give an example of what we do, and maybe that'll help you understand a little. So one of our main concerns is the prison industrial complex. Prison for profit, because slavery still happens in prison, right? And there's a tremendous amount of trauma that comes from being in prison. And we have an understanding, we're working from the understanding, which is transformative, to work from the understanding that the reason that a person went to prison in the first place is very often systemic in nature, and they were traumatized before they left. And then they went to prison and they incurred more trauma. So when they come out of prison, not only do they not have a place to stay, and a half a dozen more systemic problems that don't allow them to live like regular people in society, right? They also have trauma barriers to having relationships. So one of the things we do is to form a bridge between the community that was harmed by whatever it was that they did to go to prison in the first place, and on occasion, if possible, the actual person that was harmed by whatever it was that they did to go to prison, and ask what accountability they need, because we understand that prison is punishment. It is not accountability. Accountability and punishment are very different things. So we're looking for accountability, because accountability brings transformation. If you're held accountable for your actions, you understand what you did, you understand how it hurt people, you understand how to move forward doing something different. So that's what we're looking to do, to transform how we think of justice, because punishment is not justice.
Beautiful. So I'm also going to flip it as people are putting comments in the chat. It is not equitable for Jennifer for this to be one way. So Tom has put in a question in the chat, but Tom, I'm going to ask you first, would you share, what are your views on community control of police?
Sure. Full disclosure, I guess, is I'm a co-chair of the Green Party of New Jersey, and the Green Party does have pretty clear positions, and particularly from the Howie Hawkins campaign that I worked on. He ran for president with Angela Walker, and our understanding is it's not a civilian review board. That's been proven that they don't work. It for us is a lot of what Jennifer's been talking about, that it's has to examine and understand and make the connections of systemic issues, and that what the police may look like. And actually the Transformative Justice Project had a presentation a month or two ago with an organization out in Oregon that has somewhat of a template for it, and that they do work through the police with the police's money. However, they cover a majority of the calls, because police are almost never really needed. I think we understand that. So they will help with the unhoused or domestic issues. A lot of times it's just a medical issue that someone calls. So that's what I see it as, but there's examples that are few and far between. There's a lot of good work going out in Chicago. So I'm always, it's good to have a position, but to actually see it fleshed out in real time and what it might look like, in particular, in our locality in New Jersey, because we do have some unique situations, or more intense, or numbers as far as racial inequality or staggering. Not something to be proud of, but we lead the nation as far as incarceration and all kinds of other things that
Absolutely.
affect us.
Thank you. So Jennifer, what is your response to community control of police? Thank you, Tom.
Well, because I can't go around and burn down every police station, I would like I would like to see CCRBs be given the power to work, right? I would like to see them have subpoena control. I would like the community to be able to say, no, I think that we should take this to court, right? I would like to see the police unions lose funding, right? The community pays for a tremendous amount of lobbying money that the police unions just have a tremendous amount of control over what happens in New Jersey, and it's dangerous. A lot of what needs to happen with policing in New Jersey specifically, is around education. You'd be shocked to find out how many people I talk to that don't know that we vote for the sheriff, and that the sheriff has a lot of control about what goes on in your community. Sean Golden has been the sheriff since I started voting, and he is not a good guy. He is not on the side of good ever. He goes against the AG about imprisoning undocumented people. He calls ICE when he's not supposed to. Like, he's not a good guy, right? So, and we don't realize, we're not connected to the fact that we have power in those situations. And of course, at heart, I am a socialist, and I would like to see the cahoots model in every single community. I would love to see community policing in every community. I would love it.
Well, thank you for that. So we have a question from Judy, but before we have Jennifer answer, I'm going to ask you a question. So what are the responses of people engaged in transformative justice work regarding young people of color who decide to go into various police forces with the desire to change from within? So Judy, in your lived experience, what are your thoughts about that? And do you think it works?
I don't know if it works or not. My experience is having 3 of my all-time favorite students decide to go into police work. And I am, I'm a teacher. My job is to support them in their decisions that are not obviously self-destructive. And it was difficult seeing these 3 all young men make that decision. I have not been in touch with 2 of them. The third lives out of state, different place. Was just made a corporal, is still looking pretty starry-eyed about his decision. And so very ambivalent. I wish them all the luck in the world from changing from within. I just hope they are not changed from their experience.
Well, it's interesting. So from personal experience, I am the daughter of law enforcement, the goddaughter of the first African-American detective in Monmouth County and the first African-American who headed the police academy in Monmouth County and the daughter of a corrections officer. It doesn't work. So again, go in with the, and part of it is knowing your history and knowing, you know, so what's the fundamental history of policing? It came out of the slave patrols. So, you know, it's like asking an alligator to be a kitten. It's just, it's fundamentally, you know, at its root, it is almost fundamentally unchangeable. And a lot of, you know, African Americans grew up, you know, if I go and I prove and I'm as good as, and I do this, it is going to bring about these changes. That's not how it works. It's simply not how it works. I have recently retired police officer, lieutenant, NYPD, who is, you know, going through his own post-traumatic treatment because he was almost killed by fellow police officers. He was set up when he became inconvenient for changes that he wanted to make from within the system. So this is, you know, my father and my godfather's history is a little bit remote, but this was, we're talking in the last, 5 years. So what has to change is consciousness, and what has to evolve is the understanding and knowing of the history. And I don't know if that's possible in policing. Or put it this way, it might be possible, but it's very difficult. And particularly if the person's consciousness has not been attuned to understanding what it is that they're trying to take on. So that's my take on it, and that's my lived experience with it. Jennifer.
So I have a lot of conversations about the change within model, and I understand where people are coming from. I do. And it's the same reason that people run for government offices, and people have said, oh, you should run for, no, I shouldn't. And here's why, because I don't believe in the system. And so I have no business in it. I'm better off working outside the system and teaching people about the system. And if you want to run, I will teach you what you need to know before you walk into the muck. But here's the thing. So I use a very simple sort of analogy for changing the system from within. If you have a house with a broken foundation and you attempt to fix the windows first, you have wasted your money. Do not waste your life trying to fix a broken foundation, because it's, first of all, you didn't build it. And the only way to fix a broken foundation is to level the house and start again. That's why abolition. I feel for them. I really do. I was going to cry when you were talking about it, but I don't think it's possible to change it from within.
I'd like to piggyback on something there.
Yes, Mr. Effa.
Hi, Miss Jennifer. I call her. We talked about that village thing. She's my little sister, niece, cousin. I don't know, but I have I have a little bit more age on her though, and I've been around a minute, and I'm been called professional thug or whatever the case may be. I commend those young men that want to go into policing, because you have to change from within. However, the fish is bad from the head. You must change the head of any organization. You have to change your own head, your own consciousness. And over the years, I've worked in a professional situation where we talked about applying the defund the police strategies. I worked in that exact situation. I worked along with police and fire departments on doing the calls with a social work colleague. We took those non-quote unquote criminal calls, sometimes they were, but because I would do the crisis intervention, the social service, medical, housing, code enforcement interventions, we did not have to go through the legal realm. And because I also trained the police officers on crisis intervention and how to manage social services, many of them became more aware because we're giving them jobs and positions and authority on things they have no training or skill on. The things that we're asking of them to do, they do not get in the academy. So you have somebody who was socialized in their home with stupidity, craziness, and racism. They're coming out on the street applying this crash course of stuff that it takes 1, 2, 3 years to even begin to grasp. And you also have to have people in the positions that I was in to have a certain personality and dynamic, because many times I would have to manhandle the police and put them in check, because when you, and we know in psychology 101, if you give someone that badge and tell them they have a certain power, there's a certain conscious dynamic that changes. So you have to reel that in, and they have to, as I said, be educated, be socially and self-aware, and it's a difficult dynamic. We have to get away from the patty rollers who were started to go and chase the runaway, out of control Negroes. That's how our policing in America was started. That mindset still carries on today. And we have the systemic and internalized racism that compounds and pushes this madness. So, and that's what it is. That process of defunding the police and putting in monies to do social and mental health services works, because I've done it right here in the good old state of New Jersey. And New Jersey is so systemically racist and crazy. You guys can't even imagine, because unless you've had to step and be in that world, you bypass it because you can shut it off at will. So that's what I wanted to add on. And it does work. The change can be done. The top has to be changed. The fish, some of these police chiefs around, I'm gonna say all of them in all municipalities in New Jersey, got to be run out of town. That's simple as that. That's all I can make a comment on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So now I would like to open it up and perhaps hear from some other people that we haven't heard from tonight. So if we all could reflect on a moment or statement in true justice that stands out or challenged your thinking in new ways, share with your group your reflection. Did anyone have a moment that particularly stood out for them? And you can just even, say what that moment was.
Carol, I'd like to share something.
Yes.
So when I learned about lynching throughout my life, I just saw it as one person being killed. And what this film made me realize is that the whole community was affected, that the terror that the whole family and the whole community faced. And I don't think it was in this film, but someone said something like, your brother was lynched yesterday, and today you have to go work for the people who lynched them and act like everything's okay.
Yes.
And it struck me how the same thing is going on with the police brutality today, that it's not just that one person that is affected, it's the family, the community that is terrorized.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or, same thing with stories of rape. You were raped by the master, and then you had to go wait hand and foot on his wife.
Right.
And you were powerless against that. You had to breastfeed the white children of the lady of the house while your own baby went hungry, and powerless to do anything else about that. And this went down through the generations. And so it's never just, one person being raped or one person being lynched. This was used to use fear to control other people who knew that this was happening. So yeah, very, very powerful. Here is another. What is your understanding of Bryan Stevenson's statement? We're all more than the worst thing we've ever done. I'd like to reflect on that.
That's the tagline to my nonprofit, so I won't cheat.
What does that mean? We're all more than the worst thing you've ever done. And I'm thinking of the Jeffrey Dahmers. I'm thinking of the Hitlers. So we're all more than the worst thing you've
But
ever done.
honestly, even Hitler was somebody's son, was somebody's lover, was somebody's friend. So to look at a holistic person outside of labeling them a criminal is the way to transform justice. That's the way to do it. You have to look at a holistic person, because honestly, if the worst thing that I had ever done was tattooed on my face, I would never leave the house again. Right? Nobody wants to be labeled by the worst day you've ever had, by the worst choice you've ever made. Because that's not who you are. Who you are is what you did every day before and what you did every day after.
Right.
It's who you are to the people that love you.
Absolutely. So, and Tom would like to share something about the film. So please, Tom.
I guess I didn't watch the whole thing, but in the beginning part, I guess the part that struck me was him talking about going to Disney World, because I had the opportunity through the Boy Scouts to go soon after it was opened also, and just had an amazing experience. And just for him to describe his experience was just, I don't see it through that lens, obviously, because of the way I look, but it was just incredible. Here I'm thinking this is 1975 and things were not different, and still aren't different, but such blatancy. It just, that was very poignant about the film.
Yes, it was a very, very poignant opening to the film. And somewhat typical when his mother was in don't you cry, and you go get right back in that water, which is, so typical of a Black parent. That is, from the outside looking in, it might look, cruel, but it's like that parent is teaching that child how to survive. And he talks about standing in that water, fighting back the tears. I had that parent. Girl, you get right back up there. You go right, so what? I'm gonna give you something to cry for. You better come over here. You know what? You want to cry? Let me give you something to cry for. But it was teaching me how to survive, just as the way Bryan Stevenson's mother was teaching him how to survive.
Yeah, and just the direct response, Carol.
Pardon, Tom?
No, go ahead. I was just going to directly respond, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
There's also a high price for that, because you're also being taught how to stuff your feelings, right? Don't cry. Don't let them see that this hurts, that this is painful. And that sets you up for what ultimately becomes your early grave, your early diabetes, your early heart disease, your early depression, your early cancer. It sets you up. And it's just not cool, and it is not acceptable, and it is not all right. It is not all right to have had a childhood like that. And some of you who are more who are very observant, and perhaps in the medical field, can look at Bryan Stevenson, and his body bears the cost of having lived epigenetic stress and the stress, the stress of that kind of childhood, as well as the epigenetic stress of the past and the intergenerational trauma and the racial terror that he grew up with.
Mhm. Yeah, okay, I was just gonna add that though I was raised, and my father, he grew up in Jersey City, where obviously there was a lot of racism, and I went to high school in Secaucus after moving from Minnesota, and the phrase that the kids used in school is, yeah, we moved out of Jersey City when the blacks moved in. And my dad actually lived in Georgia for about 5 years, and he was a lot of things, but he always taught us specifically not to be racist. And I mean, to the fact that none of those people who pulled their kids out had, maybe they just didn't have the courage, but that they didn't have that education, right? Because racism's taught, it's socialized, is just mind blowing.
It is, it is. So now, anyone else, what did you see? Anyone, what did you see or hear anything in the film that was new or surprising to you? Oh, yes, Miss Lorraine, she's waving. She's not firm.
I know.
Come on,
Not at
Miss
all.
Lorraine.
I saw the documentary before, but I intentionally watched again because very often you see things the second time or the third time that you didn't see the first time. One thing that hadn't hit me was when he talked about after a lynching, not so much the public ones that were horrible, but if they hung somebody up, like the poem that I've shared before, they hung somebody up on your property, you were not allowed to move the body. Think about that. The family that lived in that house or lived a quarter of a mile down the road had to walk past and see that. What kind of trauma is that for a person of any age? And I thought about my parents, both Southerners from Georgia. And I began to think about, as Bryan Stevenson talked at different times about life in the South, how challenging, how difficult, how shut down it was. I thought about my parents and their getting up out of there. Now, they were not married. My father came to New Jersey first, and my mother went 2 or 3 different places, but she ended up in New Jersey. And when I went to school, and I went in Georgia, my mother was already gone, and my dad was here, and his wife, second wife, was gone. So I said, Daddy, I want you to move to Georgia with me. Well, you would have thought I said, I want you to cut off your other arm, because my father had one arm. And he said, I am not going back down there. I got out of that. I'm not going back. And I can remember him telling me stories about walking down the street and having to step off the curb when a white person was coming through. Trauma. We are a people. Okay, I'm not trying to dismiss Europeans. I'm talking about the people of African ancestry who grew up anywhere in the diaspora. We are people that are marked by trauma. That doesn't go away. And, we didn't get the therapy. We didn't get the medication to get it out of us. There was no movement stuff happening, help us. So where is it? It's in here. It was in my mother. It was in my father. It was in their parents. And we drag it to this day because it's now part of us. Looking at the film again brought me really, really face to face with the horrors of being trapped. You know, the men he represented knew that they were doomed, that white folks were not going to let them get out of this. And I had forgotten that that was just a matter of fact. They didn't think twice about it, they knew it. And so in my own life, I will say, there is no magic bullet. You cannot pour new wine into old skins. Yes, Teresa, the fish is bad from the head down. And thank you. This is really, really important because you walk around with this stuff inside and don't even think about it. So there's a chance to express and share and hear. Thank you, Jennifer. I love you, girl. Mwah.
Love you, Miss Lorraine.
So, thank you, thank you, thank
Carol,
you.
Tony had his hand up.
Yeah, so Tony, please.
Well, for me, what was really scary, well, what is scary and haunting is when I see the pictures of the lynchings and you see the white people, often families and children, the looks on their faces when they're watching the lynching, I just can't understand it. Sometimes they dress up, it's some kind of occasion, and they're watching something that myself and a lot of people wouldn't do to the most vile animal. I don't understand it, but we're living in a country with people like that, and some of them may still be alive. What did they teach their children? It's just, so if they were capable of that, then we can perhaps better understand the things going on today, because change doesn't happen that quickly. I mean, if they were capable of that, which I still can't comprehend, then I you know, it's just very upsetting, it's very depressing, and it's very depressing in terms of thinking about possibilities for change.
Yeah, what aren't they capable of? I often say that this might be a fundamentally unsolvable problem in America because, Tony, this wasn't remote. These people aren't, not only are they still not alive, they're your neighbors. They are the grandchildren and children of the people who did this. The Great Migration from the South to the North went up to 1970. You were alive in 1970. I certainly was alive in 1970. These are our neighbors. This is not, you know, some remote history. This is unfolding and is happening in real time right now. And this mentality, it's not gone. You can still get these postcards where you see, like you say, little children all dressed up. We're going to go see the lynching. That was family entertainment. And you could still purchase these postcards. They were made into postcards. The people thought that this was marketable entertainment. And they bought it and they sold and they celebrated it. And they taught their children to celebrate this. And those little babies that were being, this is what, you know, they were teething on, they're your neighbors. These are our contemporaries. This is not gone away. So, for example, it took until 2018. Do you hear me? 2018. How long ago was 2018? Years. It took until 2018 to pass legislation that made lynching a federal crime. 2018. Discuss why you think it took more than a century to make that change. And the answer to that is because they're your neighbors. They're here now, living now. That thought, that process, that this is a good idea, this is how we treat people that we don't think are quite human, is a modern concept.
Well, my understanding is that Congress has tried dozens of times to pass that bill to outlaw lynching, and it was always Southern congressmen, I think it was senators, who stopped it. It was always the Southern congressman.
Absolutely. What does Bryan Stevenson mean when he says, the North won the Civil War, but the South won the narrative war? The answer is the current US Congress.
I heard on radio about DC getting statehood or moving towards statehood, that back in the day when they tried for statehood 100 years ago, they decided it had a large Black population, and the people decided rather than have rather than make it a state, because even the people who were living there, the white people who were living there, decided they would rather not it be a state if it meant that many Black people could vote. It was something to that effect. So that's why it remained just a non-state, a different thing. So.
Yeah, and to this day, DC is, known as Chocolate City. So the power, it still has a large Black population, and the powers that be do not want that kind of political power, potential power at the policy level to be where there is a majority Black population. So
back to the lynching law, I think in order to vote for it, you have to reconcile your history. And people are not willing to do that. They just want to push it under the rug. Then, and if you make a law that says it's illegal, you have to face the fact that you did it, that it had been done, it is happening, and nobody wants to do that.
Right, and it's currently happening.
Right.
It's currently happening. People are getting lynched right now today. Like, it looks different. They don't hang people from trees, but they shoot them immediately upon arriving at a scene without seeing what's happening, without knowing who called, without any process. They shoot people immediately and film it and use it for fodder for their websites. That website that I was talking about, from those stickers outside, they have videos of Black people being murdered and conversations about how BLM would stick up for them, but only if they were criminals and all the things. So that people are still amused. They are still watching lynchings. They are still enjoying it. They just get to do it at home in private.
right.
Correct. And those are the ones that you only hear about because there are many undocumented. If then things were documented, they were lied about. And it's the same things that were going on in 1950, 1960, 1970 are still going on in 2021, North and South. In the South, in some areas, it may be more blatant. In the North, it's just as vile, and it's there, and you may do it in a sneaky roundabout kind of way, but it's there. So anything south of the Canadian border is still suspect, and it hasn't changed. The one advantage now, we have social media and everybody with a cell phone that's highlighting what we as Black and brown people have always known.
Yeah. So
That's it in a nutshell.
it's just so, all of this that we have to unpack, that we have to, well, we don't have to. I mean, it's an invitation, and we're all here voluntarily looking at this, discussing these hard things. I know people, heartfelt and tears, and I would invite people to go back and watch this film again. This is a film that can put, if you are open, if you can open your heart, this documentary can potentially change your life, can potentially alter your perception, alter your reality, and put you, it is absolutely transformative down on the molecular level. it speaks to us epigenetically. And I know it changed my life last night sitting there, and I found new language. And I think when you made the comments about the rage that you feel, Jennifer, some of the languaging that Bryan Stevenson uses, and he names when he says, "I am broken too. I've dedicated my life to helping the broken system and helping the broken person." And then I came to realize I too am broken. And that was so helpful to me because it also helped me name and place my age and this ache that's inside of me that has been nameless. And it is my own brokenness. In spite of my success in life, in spite of my privilege in life and some of my advantage in life, I too, like Bryan Stevenson, am broken. And I just realized it in a different and in a fuller way than I had heretofore. And it actually helped me with some of that rage that I carry.
But from being broken grows empathy.
Pardon?
And from being broken comes empathy.
Yes.
And I think that's probably part of why everyone here is engaged. I kind of think the suggestion to watch it again is a great one, but I also think if each person who's seen it gets someone else, I mean, I think we're probably all kindred spirits on this call, but if you commit to getting someone else to watch it, then that might be great work.
Yes, absolutely. Bring somebody with you. Bring somebody with you. And then also in that term, racialized terror. And that was a part of that. If you read Isabel Wilkerson's book,
Yes.
both of her books, and we talked about that great migration from the South to the North. So let's just, we have a few minutes left. We're going to end on time tonight, but let's end on the concept of truth and reconciliation that came into the chat. So Ray Hinton, so if you read or see the movie Just Mercy, it's about Ray Hinton. Ray Hinton shares that nobody has apologized to him for his wrongful conviction and incarceration. 30 years behind bars, wrongful conviction. Why do you think this might be important to him?
What is it again?
So he reflects that nobody has apologized to him for his wrongful conviction and incarceration. Why do you think an apology might be important to Mr. Hinton?
It shows empathy. Shows you care and that you understand and that you have remorse. You wish you could take it back, but you can't. And you just hope to have means to help recuperate the situation, however which way you could.
And maybe if you're sorry, you won't do it again.
Yeah, maybe you might not be able to do that. And at least it shows that you care that you did wrong, you know.
Requires humility to do that too.
Acknowledgement that you've done wrong, which is one thing that truth and reconciliation is looking for, that restorative justice is looking for. And if you just say, I'm sorry, that means you know that you've done something wrong, unless it's simply a court-ordered apology. Police in schools, police departments are doing a great deal to at least give lip service to transformative justice. They want to get the two parties involved in a wrong in the same room with a facilitator. But their own departments do not engage in it at all.
I know, it's quite stunning.
Carol, have you ever been told from your risk management people not to ever apologize to a patient? I know I have.
Yes, so there's a whole big school of thought around that in medicine. So now the law is written that you're being encouraged to admit error when a mistake has been made but the law is written so that that does not make you liable for blame.
Right.
Because, sometimes, when a medical error has been made, the patient really does need to know, particularly if it's something that causes harm. But yes, so that's one of those, risk management areas, and the laws are changing around that in medicine, but also slow to come about.
And the United States did apologize. I believe Bush and Obama both issued some forms of apology for the history of enslavement. It doesn't mean truth and reconciliation. It doesn't mean transformation. The apology just hangs in the air, but or just lays on the ground. Is not acted on. I wanted to ask something before we finish, though, because Jennifer, did these people put stickers up in front of your house? They targeted your house?
It did not target me personally. I live on Cookman Avenue, and it went all the way downtown and up the beach. So they're all around my house.
Wow, but
Just,
that is something that should not be allowed. There should be some sort of are you thinking about a response, or can the people in attendance tonight follow up? I mean, there should be some sort of a
reaction. I don't know what to do yet. I do know that Tion Willis, who is a member of one of our activist groups, has his own nonprofit, and he has some Black Unity stickers for his nonprofit, and he has gone around and started putting Black Unity stickers over them. And that's the only response we thought of now, because we were all just yelling, but it just happened a few hours ago. But I will happily let you know if there's an action and invite you all, because I don't know what to do exactly. It's the second time that this has happened. The Proud Boys were here putting up Hitler posters not long ago.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, they love it here.
So it was in 2008 when the U.S. House of Representatives offered an official apology for slavery, Sarah. So it was 2008. That was, Bush and Obama.
So yeah, 15 years.
So in the 6 minutes that we have left, I would like the floor is open to anyone. What might an era of truth and reconciliation look like? What might that look like?
I'll jump in here because this is something that I've thought about for a while. Since last year, the Monmouth County prosecutor said he wrote a letter that condemned the murder of George Floyd. I would like to see a movement among the police of truth-telling. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, and it's not within the system. It's asking people to critique the system from within, but critiquing the system as a whole, or the things that they have seen. There are many untold stories. We should call on them, or they can be called upon to tell their stories. There's the woman who was fired for stopping, she was a police officer. She stopped another cop from choking someone. She lost her pension and just got it back. But, so that's just one example, but that's my thought. One of them.
I have sort of a question for the group. So in the past 8 years, racism has gotten a lot bolder and a lot more out front. I think we can all agree with that. Is that a positive step to the possibility of truth-telling and reconciliation? That it's not quite so hidden, quite so in the shadows?
Well, it's interesting that you should ask that, because there have been articles written about that. Someone said, there was one article that was titled, it's like, is Trump an agent of the devil, or is he an angel? Is this, the voice of God, bringing all of this ugliness to the surface, perhaps with the opportunity to bring it to light and eradicate it and, move the needle forward. for humanity. You know, the jury is still out. I know, you know, living in a state of racial terror and being, you know, fearful and frightened on a daily basis. On most days for me, it doesn't feel like it's such a good thing.
Right.
Because people who look like me are being murdered every day. Women are disappearing, men are being murdered, women are being murdered, children are being murdered. The prisons just are swelling with more and more people. So, you know, so maybe sort of like, you know, the pimple comes to the surface and it pops and that, you know, I don't know, but it's terrifying.
But it's very scary right now. And even what Jennifer describes in Asbury Park, that's
Like to
terrifying.
respond to Donna.
Terrifying.
Yeah,
And I don't
I'd like to respond to Donna.
Yes.
Donna, this is not new. It is not grown. This is what it has been. The social media and the cameras are putting the highlights on what we have been living for decades. This is not new. You are just seeing it.
Right.
That's
We have been
probably a
living it.
very correct point.
This is why we have what they call the weathering effect in our health. Black and brown people have great disparities in health. The stress kills you. It affects your heart, your brain, your kidney function, your nervous system. We have been living this. I have been living this as a Black woman in my 60s. I'm a professional. I have certain privileges like income and my own home and all that kind of stuff. I have been Black in America all my life. This is what it has been, period. Is not greater, is you are seeing it more because
Right.
now it's in your face and you can't get away from it.
Good.
It's visible. It's visible, but it's always been there. And it's always been this sort of insidious. And I'm not going to lie and say that I wasn't looking, when I was looking for a bright spot in all of that 2016 darkness, because that was dark. That was the darkest time of my life thus far. But in all of that darkness, the bright spot that I found was, well, at least they don't have hoods on and I can see who they are. That's all I could think. Like, at least I can see them coming because they're brazen right now. And the way that we live, at least here in New Jersey, is very segregated. So like most of the time we don't have to deal with racists. They're on the other side of their gated communities. They're on the other side of the railroad tracks. Like they don't come to where we are. So it's really not an issue until we start going to places where we're not welcome. And that's not a thing that happens. I can't afford to go to places that I'm not welcome. I just happen to be in a place that I'm not welcome because I'm taking care of my grandmother. So I get to see it every day now. But for the most part, it is what it's always been. It's just so visible and frightening.
Yes, so yes, Amy, and we are right here. We're going to wrap up. This has been profound, and thank you for the engagement and interaction. Amy.
I just want to mention with a period of reconciliation would look like all these conversations that we're having happening everywhere, happening in Congress, happening in schools, but it would also make the white supremacists crazy. And I think they would come out shooting.
That's quite possible. So, you know, we again, thank you, everyone. Just take a moment, put your hands on your heart. This has been a lot this evening. Take a few breaths. Let's come back to our body and just notice what might have come up for you. Notice the noticing. Notice your feelings. What's arising. Notice the emotions, all of them, fear, anger, rage, joy, sorrow, whatever is there for you, whatever is true for you. And take a moment to honor yourself with your breath, for showing up, for being authentic, for being real. And I'd like to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It is my deep, deep, deep honor and privilege to moderate these monthly community engagements, and great gratitude to the organizers, to you, Sarah, to the UUCMC Family Ministry and Social Justice. So I'm going to say goodnight, and I don't know if Sarah or Amy or Maya, if anybody has any announcements, and we are going to call it a wrap. And thank you so much, Jennifer, for your leadership, your vulnerability, and your courage.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. The only announcement is that this is recorded and it will be up on the UUCMC website to view if anybody that you know missed it and wants to see it. The older programs are also there.
Is it in the social justice area, or where is it on the website?
It's not on the website. It's on our YouTube channel, and you can get to it through the
Oh,
web.
right. Okay.
Yeah, it's in the newsletter.
Okay.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Sorry
night.
I was late.
Thank you. Good night. Great discussion.
Thank you all.
Next month, everybody
Good
bring
meeting.
somebody.